I'm Alice, 22, female, and my family just taught me a brutal lesson about where I rank when they skipped my college graduation for a trip to Disneyland, only to turn around and ask if they could still claim me on their taxes. The silence on the other end of the phone was more than just a lack of sound. It was a vacuum, pulling all the warmth and air from my small apartment. I held the phone to my ear, my knuckles white. The question my father had just asked, so casually, so utterly devoid of self-awareness, echoed in the quiet space where my celebration should have been. "So, Alice," he'd said, his voice cheerful, "tax season is coming up. We're good to claim you one last time, right? For all the support this year." For all the support. The words twisted in my gut. What support? The bi-monthly phone calls where he'd ask how school was before launching into a 20-minute monologue about my younger sister Ashley's latest soccer tournament? The meager financial contributions that covered maybe a quarter of my rent, for which I was expected to be eternally grateful. Or was it the support I'd so desperately needed just 3 weeks ago, on the most important day of my adult life? A day they had summarily dismissed as too expensive to attend. My graduation, the culmination of 4 years of relentless work, late nights fueled by cheap coffee, and a mountain of student loans I'd taken on myself because my parents were stretched thin. I had walked across that stage, accepted my diploma in graphic design with honors, and scanned the vast auditorium crowd out of pure, foolish hope. I searched for their faces, knowing they weren't there, but my heart, that traitorous muscle, still looked for them. It found only empty seats where they should have been. The excuse had been delivered a month prior, during a brief phone call with my mom, Susan. "Oh, honey, we are so proud of you, you know that," she'd started, her voice laden with that preemptive sympathy that always signaled bad news. "But we just ran the numbers, and the flights to your university are just astronomical right now. Your dad and I, we just can't swing it, and we can't possibly leave Ashley here all by herself." I remember closing my eyes, leaning my forehead against the cool glass of my dorm room window. I'd made it easy for them. I'd chosen a state school, a good one, but not a private institution that would have crippled them financially. Still, it was a 12-hour drive or a 2-hour flight away. "It's okay, Mom," I'd said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "I understand, it's a busy time." I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I had been conditioned for years not to. My role in the family was to be the low-maintenance child, the independent one, the one who understood. This dynamic wasn't new. It was a well-worn groove in the vinyl of our family's history, a track that had been playing since Ashley was born. I was 5 when she arrived, and overnight, the center of our family's universe shifted. I became a satellite, orbiting the bright, burning star that was my little sister. I remember my 10th birthday. I had asked for a party with my friends, maybe at a bowling alley or a skating rink. My parents had exchanged a look, that familiar glance that communicated a dozen logistical and financial calculations in a split second. My dad, Mark, had knelt, ruffling my hair. "How about a nice cake at home, sweetie? It's a school night and things are a little tight." I'd agreed, because what else could I do? That weekend, my mom took Ashley and 3 of her friends to a Build-A-Bear workshop because Ashley had gotten a good report card. I sat at home, finishing the last of my plain vanilla sheet cake, the silence of the house my only companion. The pattern repeated itself, year after year, in 1,000 small and large ways. When I won the district-wide art competition in middle school, my painting displayed in the town hall, my parents said they were proud but couldn't make it to the reception because it was the same night as Ashley's parent-teacher conference. When I got my driver's license, I was told to get a part-time job to pay for my own insurance. When Ashley turned 16, a shiny used sedan with a big red bow was waiting for her in the driveway. The explanation was always plausible, always reasonable. "Alice, you're so responsible with money, we knew you could handle it." Or "Ashley is just not as focused as you, she needs the encouragement." They weren't cruel people. They weren't overtly malicious. In their minds, I'm sure they believed they were being fair. They had simply typecast me as the easy child and Ashley as the needy one, and they played their roles accordingly. I didn't need the attention, the accolades, the financial coddling. I was the responsible one, the old soul, the one who would always be okay on her own. It was a role I had played so well that they had forgotten it was a performance. They had forgotten the T underneath the capable exterior was a daughter who just wanted to be seen, to be chosen, just once. My graduation was supposed to be the one event that was undeniably mine. It was a milestone no one else in my immediate family had reached. My dad had gone to trade school and my mom hadn't gone to college. This was it, the one thing that couldn't be overshadowed by a soccer game or a school play. I had imagined the photos, the four of us standing under the university's grand stone archway, me in my cap and gown. I had pictured my dad shaking my hand, his eyes filled with a pride that was just for me. Instead, I got a text message that morning. "Congrats, sweetie, we're thinking of you. XOXO mom and dad." I'd spent the day with friends whose families had flown in from across the country, their laughter and celebration a constant, painful reminder of what I was missing. I smiled for their pictures, accepted their parents' hugs, and felt a hollowness so profound it was almost a physical ache. I told myself it was fine. They couldn't afford it. I was an adult now. I had to understand. And I did. I almost did, until the photo appeared. The final semester of college was a blur of frantic energy. My senior thesis in graphic design was a comprehensive branding project for a fictional nonprofit, and it consumed me. There were nights I didn't sleep at all, just moved from my desk to the studio and back again, my world shrinking to the glow of my monitor and the smell of industrial-strength coffee. Through it all, the thought of graduation was a tiny, persistent light at the end of a very long tunnel. It wasn't just about the piece of paper, it was a symbol. It was proof that all the solitary effort, the self-discipline my parents so admired from a distance, had amounted to something real. My communication with my family during this period was sporadic, as usual. My mom would call every couple of weeks. "How are you, honey? Are you eating enough?" she'd ask, her voice a comforting, familiar hum. I'd give her the short version, "I'm good, Mom. Busy with my final project, but it's going well." "That's our Alice," she'd say with a sigh of relief. "Always on top of things. You won't believe what Ashley did this week. She tried to dye her hair blue in the bathroom sink. Your father nearly had a heart attack when he saw the stains on the grout." The conversation would then pivot entirely to Ashley. Her high school drama, her struggles in algebra, her indecision about the prom. I would listen, offering non-committal sounds of agreement, my own stress and achievements relegated to a footnote. I was the stable, unchanging landmark by which they navigated the turbulent seas of raising my younger sister. About 2 months before the ceremony, I brought up the topic of graduation directly. I called on a Tuesday evening, hoping to catch them in a quiet moment. "Hey, so I just got the official email," I began, trying to keep my voice light. "Graduation is on May 18th. The ceremony starts at 10 a.m. I get 4 tickets, so you guys and Aunt Linda could come, or maybe Grandma." There was a brief pause. "Oh, wow, May 18th, my dad said, his voice distant. I could hear the television in the background, the telltale sounds of a basketball game. "That's coming up fast. Honey," he called out to my mom, "did you hear that? Alice's graduation is May 18th. I heard my mom's faint reply from another room. Then my dad came back on the line. "Okay, sweetie, we'll mark it on the calendar. We'll have to look at flights and everything. You know how it is." I did know how it was. Everything was a calculation, a matter of logistics and cost-benefit analysis. Still, I allowed myself a flicker of hope. I sent them the links to the university's visitor page, which had recommendations for hotels and travel. I sent them the schedule of events. I even sent a picture of the dress I was planning to wear under my gown. My mom texted back a single thumbs-up emoji. As the weeks ticked by, my inquiries were met with increasing vagueness. "We're still looking at things, honey," my mom would say. "The prices are just a little high right now. We're hoping they come down." "Maybe we could drive," I suggested, knowing it was a long shot. A 12-hour drive was a significant commitment. "Oh, I don't know," my dad chimed in on another call. "Taking 2 days off work for the drive alone would be tough, and with Ashley's school schedule, it's complicated." It was always complicated. My life, my milestones, were always an inconvenience to be navigated, while Ashley's were immovable events around which the entire family calendar revolved. The final call came on a gray April afternoon, exactly 1 month before the big day. I was sitting in the library, trying to put the finishing touches on my portfolio, when my mom's name flashed on my screen. I stepped outside, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I knew, before I even answered, what she was going to say. "Hi, sweetie," she began, her voice thick with practiced sorrow. "Your dad and I have been looking at those flights every single day." A lie? I knew it was a lie. They weren't the type to check things daily, they were procrastinators. They're just not budging. In fact, they've gone up. For the three of us to fly out, stay for 2 nights. We're looking at a couple $1,000s, honey. It's astronomical. I stared at a crack in the pavement, focusing on a tiny weed pushing its way through the concrete. "What about just you and Dad?" I asked quietly, my last shred of hope flickering. "Ashley could stay with Aunt Linda." A heavy sigh. "I can't ask Linda to do that, not with Ashley's final exams coming up, and I wouldn't feel right leaving her. She's at such a sensitive age." I was at a sensitive age once too. I was sensitive now. Didn't that matter? "We are so proud of you, Alice," she continued, filling the silence I had left. "We'll have a big party for you when you come home for the summer. A huge barbecue. We'll invite the whole family. It will be even better than some stuffy ceremony." A barbecue, that was their solution. A consolation prize for the main event they were choosing to miss. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were floating above my own body, watching a scene unfold. The anger and hurt were there, but they were buried under a thick layer of resignation. This was who they were. This was my place. To expect anything different was to set myself up for this exact feeling. "It's okay, Mom," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I get it, money's tight, don't worry about it." "Oh, you are such a good daughter," she said, audibly relieved that I had not made a scene. "So understanding. We'll celebrate when you get home, I promise." I ended the call and stood there for a long time, the phone still in my hand. The sounds of campus life buzzed around me, students laughing, skateboards clattering on the pavement, the distant chime of the university clock tower. It all felt like it was happening in another world. I was an island and the tide was going out, leaving me completely alone. I had worked so hard, not just in school, but at being the person they wanted me to be, the independent, undemanding daughter. And my reward was to be left behind, my greatest achievement dismissed by the simple, brutal excuse of being too expensive. I believed them. And that, I would soon learn, was my greatest mistake. Graduation day was a whirlwind of manufactured cheerfulness. I woke up to a stream of congratulatory texts from extended family and friends. I put on my new dress, steamed my gown, and carefully positioned my cap on my head. My roommate, Sarah, whose entire family had driven up from Ohio, gave me a tight hug. "You look amazing, Alice. I am so freaking proud of you." Her words were a balm on a wound I was trying to ignore. Throughout the day, I attached myself to her family's orbit. Her mom, a warm woman with kind eyes, insisted I stand between her and her husband for a photo. "We'll be your stand-in parents for the day," she declared. The gesture was so genuinely sweet that it brought a lump to my throat. During the ceremony, as my name was called and I walked across the stage, I scanned the crowd one last time. The sea of faces blurred together. I accepted my diploma, shook the dean's hand, and smiled for the camera, the picture of a happy, successful graduate. But inside, I felt like a ghost at a feast. The barbecue my parents had promised never materialized. When I came home for a week before starting my new job search in my college town, they were busy. Dad had a conference, and Ashley had a week-long soccer camp. We had one rushed family dinner at a chain restaurant where the conversation, once again, centered on Ashley's future. My graduation was mentioned in passing, a box that had been checked. "So glad that's all over with," my dad said with a chuckle. "Now you can start making the big bucks, right?" I just smiled and pushed my food around my plate. I returned to my college town and threw myself into finding a job. I needed the distraction. I needed a purpose that wasn't tied to my family's approval. I spent my days polishing my portfolio, sending out applications, and networking. I spent my evenings quietly, avoiding social media, which felt like a minefield of happy family photos I couldn't bear to see. The bomb I didn't know was coming went off on a Tuesday night, exactly 1 week after that hollow family dinner. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when a notification popped up. Linda Miller has tagged you in a photo. Aunt Linda, my dad's sister. She was a prolific social media user, her page a curated gallery of family events and inspirational quotes. I rarely paid attention to it, but being tagged was unusual. My heart gave a little lurch of curiosity, and I tapped the notification. The screen loaded, and for a moment I couldn't process what I was seeing. It was an album titled Magical Family Fun Time. Sparkles, the cover photo was a group shot taken by a professional park photographer. There, standing in front of the iconic fairytale castle, was my entire family. My dad, my mom, my sister Ashley. My Aunt Linda, her husband, and their 2 kids. All of them. They were beaming, their faces lit with pure, unadulterated joy. And they were all wearing matching t-shirts. Bright, garish, custom-made shirts. In big, bubbly letters they read, "Family First." I stared, my thumb frozen over the screen. The background, the clothes, the context, it all crashed into my consciousness at once. That wasn't just any castle. It was the Disneyland castle. They were at Disneyland. I clicked through the album, each photo a fresh stab to the heart. There was my mom and Ashley, wearing matching Minnie Mouse ears, hugging Goofy. There was my dad and my uncle, laughing with their arms around each other on what looked like Main Street. USA, there was a picture of them all having dinner at some themed restaurant, a massive, decadent-looking cake in the center of the table. The timestamp on the album said it was posted 3 hours ago. The photos were from last week. The same week they were too busy for my celebration barbecue. The same week my graduation was still a fresh, gaping wound. Flights were just too expensive. My mom's voice echoed in my head, now laced with a sickening new tone of deceit. They couldn't afford a flight for 2 people to see their daughter graduate college, but they could afford park tickets, airfare, hotels, and matching t-shirts for a whole family vacation to the most expensive theme park on Earth. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about priorities. It was about choices. They had looked at 2 options, my graduation and a family trip to Disneyland, and they had chosen Disneyland. They had chosen fun. They had chosen my sister. They had chosen everyone but me. The caption Aunt Linda had written under the main photo was the final, brutal twist of the knife. Such a special trip with the people who matter most, so important to make memories. Family First blessed Disneyland. Family First. The words burned on the screen. Was I not family? Was my achievement not worthy of a memory? The hypocrisy was so staggering, so profoundly insulting, that it left me breathless. They didn't just choose not to come, they had actively lied, crafting a careful, plausible excuse designed to make me feel guilty for even wanting them there. They had played on my understanding nature, using the very quality they claimed to admire in me as a tool to enable their own selfishness. A cold, hard clarity washed over me, displacing the initial shock and hurt. All the small slights, the overlooked achievements, the constant deferrals to Ashley's needs, they weren't just isolated incidents. They were part of a deep, ingrained pattern. I wasn't the easy child. I was the forgotten one. My independence wasn't a virtue they celebrated. It was a convenience they exploited. I closed the app, my hand trembling. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the dark street. The tears that I had held back for weeks finally came, hot and silent. They weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of rage. A quiet, deep, and utterly transformative rage. They had made their choice. They had drawn a line. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to pretend I didn't see it. In the days that followed, a strange calm settled over me. The rage didn't vanish, but it cooled, hardening into a solid core of resolve in my chest. I didn't call them. I didn't text my Aunt Linda a string of angry question marks. I didn't do anything. My silence was a new and unfamiliar power. For my entire life, my role had been to smooth things over, to understand, to be the first to reach out after a disagreement. This time, I was a stone wall. I saved the photo. I took a screenshot of the main group picture, their smiling faces, the castle, the ridiculous family-first shirts, and I set it as the contact photo for my dad, my mom, and my aunt. It was a stark, private reminder. Every time one of them might call or text, I would see that image. I would see the choice they made. My job search became my sanctuary. It was a world where my worth was judged by my portfolio, my skills, and my professionalism, not by my place in a family pecking order. I threw myself into it with a ferocity that surprised even me. I customized every cover letter, researched every company, and went into interviews with a newfound confidence. I had something to prove, but for the first time, it was only to myself. About a week after the Disneyland revelation, my mom called. I saw the family first photo pop up on my screen and took a deep breath before answering. "Hi, honey," she chirped, her voice oozing a cheerful ignorance that was almost impressive. "I feel like I haven't talked to you in ages. How's the job hunt going?" "It's going well," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the enthusiasm I usually feigned for her benefit. "Oh, good." There was a slight pause. She had noticed the shift in my tone. "Just well, find any promising leads?" "A few," I replied. I didn't offer details. I didn't tell her about the second interview I had lined up with a promising design firm downtown. That was my news, mine to hold on to. "Well, that's wonderful," she said, trying to regain her footing. "So, listen, Ashley's prom is coming up, and you will not believe the drama over finding a dress. We went to 5 different stores this weekend." I tuned her out. As she prattled on about tulle, sequins, and the teenage angst of my sister, I stared at the wall of my apartment. It was like listening to a radio broadcast from a distant country. It had nothing to do with me. I was no longer a citizen of that world. When she finally paused for breath, I gave a noncommittal. "Anyway," she finished, "I just wanted to call and check in. We miss you." "Okay, Mom," I said. "I have to go, I'm busy." I ended the call before she could respond. Hanging up on my mother was an act so contrary to my nature that my hand shook slightly after I did it. But it also felt like severing a rope that had been chafing my skin for years. A few days later, my dad texted me. "Hey, champ, Mom said you sounded a little down. Everything okay?" I looked at the text, then at the photo of him, grinning under the California sun. Down? I wasn't down. I was awake. I typed back a simple reply. "I'm fine, just focused on work." My short, clipped responses were a deviation from the norm, and they were beginning to notice. But they couldn't possibly guess the reason. In their world, they had done nothing wrong. The Disneyland trip was a separate event, completely disconnected from the unfortunate circumstance of my expensive graduation. To them, there was no link, no hypocrisy. They lived in a world of their own making, where their actions had no consequences because their intentions, in their own minds, were good. This period of silence was clarifying. I replayed my life in my head, but with the new filter of the Disneyland photo. I saw everything differently. The time my dad missed my high school awards night to take Ashley to a concert wasn't just a scheduling conflict, it was a choice. The way my parents' eyes would glaze over when I talked about my art, only to light up when Ashley talked about her friends, wasn't just a difference in interests. It was a difference in investment. I had spent my life believing their narrative, that I was the strong one who didn't need as much. Now I saw the truth. I was the convenient one who was easier to neglect. They hadn't built my strength, they had demanded it. They had forced me into a state of self-sufficiency so they could pour all their resources, their time, their money, their attention into my sister. 2 weeks after my silent treatment began, I got the job. It was the one I really wanted, a junior graphic designer position at a boutique agency with a great reputation. The pay was modest, but it was more than enough to live on. It came with benefits. It was a real adult job, my job. I told Sarah, my former roommate, and she screamed with delight. We went out for celebratory drinks. I told my college friends, who flooded my phone with messages of congratulations. I did not tell my parents. The news felt too precious, too much my own to offer it up to them. I didn't want to hear their empty, "That's great, honey," before the conversation inevitably shifted back to Ashley. This achievement was mine alone. It was the first brick in the foundation of a life I was building for myself, far away from their shadow. The silence continued, a quiet, humming power line of unspoken truths, waiting for the right storm to make it arc and snap. It was a Monday afternoon, nearly 2 months after my graduation. I was at my new desk, trying to figure out a particularly tricky layout for a client's brochure. My work phone buzzed with an email, my computer hummed, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of purpose that was wholly my own. I was contributing, creating, and earning my own living. The feeling was intoxicating. That's when my personal cell phone, sitting face down on the desk, began to vibrate. I glanced at the screen. The family first photo lit up, my father's grinning face at its center. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail as I had been doing more and more frequently. But something made me pick it up. Maybe it was the confidence from my new job, or maybe I was just tired of hiding. "Hello," I answered, my voice professional and cool. "Alice, hey champ, how's it going?" My dad's voice was breezy, loud, and utterly clueless. It was the voice he used and he felt he was doing his fatherly duty by checking in. "I'm at work, Dad," I said. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. "Oh, right, the new job, how's that treating you? Are you the big shot designer yet?" he boomed, laughing at his own joke. "It's going well, thank you," I said. "Is everything okay?" I wanted to cut to the chase. These pleasantries were a minefield of insincerity. Yeah, everything's great here. Ashley made the varsity soccer team as a junior, can you believe it? The coach says he's never seen a player with her kind of drive." Of course. The conversation had found its way back to Ashley in under 30 seconds. A new record. I stayed silent, doodling on a notepad, letting his words wash over me without comment. "Anyway," he said, finally sensing my lack of engagement. "I was actually calling for a reason. I was just talking to our accountant." My stomach clenched. I had a sudden, sinking feeling I knew where this was going. "And you know, tax season is going to be creeping up on us before we know it," he continued, his tone shifting from proud dad to man of business. "He was just confirming a few things, and I wanted to check with you. We're good to claim you one last time, right? As a dependent." I stopped doodling. I put my pen down with a quiet click. The entire office seemed to fade away. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. He had just asked me that. He had just, with a straight face and a cheerful voice, asked to financially benefit from my existence in the same year he couldn't be bothered to witness the single biggest achievement of my life. He must have mistaken my stunned silence for agreement because he kept talking. "I mean, it just makes sense. We did help you out with rent and everything for the first half of the year, and since you were a student for most of it, it'll help us out a ton with the return. It's for all the support this year." For all the support. Those were the magic words, the words that broke the dam. The cool, hard resolve in my chest melted, and the hot rage I had been suppressing for weeks came roaring to the surface. But it wasn't a screaming, out-of-control rage. It was sharp, focused, and crystal clear. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was as solid as granite. There was a pause. "No," he repeated, confused. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, you will not be claiming me on your taxes," I said, my voice gaining strength with each word. "Legally, you can't. I provided more than half of my own support this year. I have a full-time job. I am not your dependent." Whoa, Alice, hang on," he said, his tone shifting from cheerful to defensive. "Don't get all technical on me. It's a family thing. We've always done it this way. It helps us out." "A family thing," I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "That's funny. I've been wondering what that phrase means to you lately. What's that supposed to mean? He snapped, his patience gone. And then I unleashed it, not in a yell, but in a steady, lethal torrent of truth. It means that you don't get to ignore me when it's inconvenient, and then try to cash in on me when it's beneficial, I stated calmly. You don't get to tell me that a plane ticket to my graduation is too expensive, and then take the entire family on a vacation to Disneyland the very next week. Dead silence. For the first time, he was speechless. I knew, in that moment, that he hadn't thought for a second that I knew. He and my mother had constructed a reality where their lie was perfect and their daughter was blissfully ignorant. I saw the pictures, Dad, I continued, my voice unwavering. I saw the matching family-first shirts. It was a very clear message. My graduation, my 4 years of hard work wasn't worth your time or your money. But a trip for Ashley, Aunt Linda, and the rest of the family was. You made your priorities clear. It wasn't like that, he stammered, completely blindsided. The trip was planned months ago, it was a group thing, the timing was just unfortunate. The timing? I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. You lied to me, you could have told me the truth. You could have said, Alice, we're so sorry, but we have a non-refundable family trip planned the week after your graduation, so we can't make it. It would have hurt, but I would have understood the truth. Instead, you chose to lie. You made me feel like I was a financial burden, like my accomplishment was an inconvenience you couldn't afford. You're being dramatic, he shot back, his only defense now to attack me. You're twisting things. No, I said, and this was the announcement, the THIS that had been building inside me. I'm not. I'm finally seeing things clearly. And here's what I see. You want to know if you can claim me as a dependent? Here's my answer. Not only can you not claim me, but I am officially declaring my independence from all of it. The P. Retense is over. You don't get to call me for tax benefits. You don't get to use me as your responsible daughter talking point. And you don't get to expect me to be understanding anymore. Family first, Dad, you said it yourselves. I've finally realized I'm not included in your definition of family. So from now on, I'll be putting myself first. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I had taken their narrative, their excuses, their ridiculous t-shirt slogan, and turned it back on them. I had broken the unspoken rule. I had stopped being easy. For a long moment, the only sound on the phone was the faint static of an open line. I could picture my dad perfectly. Standing in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, his face a mask of disbelief and sputtering indignation. He had walked into a simple administrative phone call and stumbled into a revolution. How dare you, he finally whispered, his voice low and trembling with anger. After everything we've done for you. What have you done? I asked, my voice still dangerously calm. You helped with a fraction of my rent and you call me on my birthday. That doesn't buy you the right to lie to me and disrespect me. That doesn't make you a parent. It makes you a landlord who occasionally remembers my name. You are an ungrateful child. He suddenly roared, the shock giving way to pure fury. We gave you everything. You gave Ashley everything? I corrected him, and the truth of that statement, spoken aloud for the first time, was liberating. You gave me the leftovers. You gave me expectations and assumptions. You assumed I would be fine. You assumed I wouldn't find out. You assumed I would always understand. Your assumptions were wrong. I heard a fumbling noise and then my mother's voice, shrill and panicked, broke in. She must have been on speakerphone or he had handed it to her. Alice, what is going on? Your father is white as a sheet. What did you say to him? I told him the truth, Mom, I said, my energy starting to wane. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a weary sadness in its wake. I told him I know about Disneyland. A sharp intake of breath on her end. Oh, honey, she began, her voice shifting into its familiar, placating tone. You don't understand. That trip it was complicated. No, it was simple, I cut her off. You had a choice and you chose not me, and that's okay, I accept your choice. But my choice now is to be done with this dynamic. I'm not angry anymore, I'm just done. Done? What do you mean done? She cried. You can't be done with your family. Can I? I asked. You were all done with my graduation. You were done with being honest. It turns out done is a choice anyone can make, and I'm making it. I need to go now. I have a job, remember, the one I got on my own to build a life for myself. Alice, don't you dare hang up this phone. My dad yelled in the background. But his authority was gone. His voice, which had once held so much power over me, now sounded like the desperate shouting of a man who had lost control of the narrative. He wasn't my formidable father anymore. He was just Mark, a man who had been caught in a lie. I love you both, I said, and it was true in a distant, complicated way. But I need to love myself more. Goodbye. I pressed the red button on my screen, ending the call. The silence that followed was immense. I sat at my desk, my heart still beating a little too fast, and looked around the office. My coworker 2 cubicles over was laughing quietly with someone on the phone. My boss walked by with a stack of papers and gave me a small, encouraging smile. This was my life now. A place where I was seen, where my contributions mattered, where I was respected. The fallout was swift but contained. My phone immediately began to buzz. First Dad, then Mom, then Dad again. Then a text from Aunt Linda. Your mother called me, very upset. What is your problem? Some things are for family. You should learn to respect that. I looked at her message, then at the photo of her smugly wearing that shirt. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. My problem? I typed a single response back to her. I agree. Thanks for the advice. Then I did something I had never dreamed of doing. I blocked all 3 of them, Mom, Dad, and Aunt Linda. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was a necessary one. It was a boundary. It was me, building a fortress wall not to keep everyone out, but to finally give myself a safe space inside. The immediate silence was blissful. The constant hum of their expectations, their drama, their casual neglect, it was all gone. There was only peace. The first few weeks of silence were strange. I kept checking my phone out of habit, half expecting to see a barrage of angry messages that had somehow bypassed my block. But there was nothing. The quiet was absolute. It felt like walking out of a loud, chaotic party into the cool, still night air. At Furs. It's jarring, but then your senses adjust, and you can finally hear yourself think. Without the constant, low-level stress of managing my family's feelings and navigating their neglect, I had so much more energy. My work flourished. My boss praised my creativity and my strong work ethic. I made friends at the agency, people who knew me as Alice, the talented designer, not Alice, the forgotten daughter. We'd go out for lunch, grab drinks after work, and talk about our hopes, our projects, and our futures. They saw me for who I was, not for who my family had decided I should be. One Saturday, about a month after the phone call, I found myself cleaning out a box of old college mementos. Near the bottom, I found the program from my graduation ceremony. I ran my fingers over my name, printed in crisp, black ink. I remembered the ache of loneliness I had felt that day, the desperate searching for faces in the crowd. The memory didn't hurt anymore. Instead, I felt a wave of compassion for the 22-year-old girl I had been just a few months ago. She had tried so hard to be worthy of their love, not realizing that their love was not a prize to be earned. It was a gift they had simply chosen not to give her. I put the program back in the box, not with sadness, but with a sense of closure. That day was no longer a symbol of my family's rejection. It was the day my new life began, even if I didn't know it yet. It was the day I walked across a stage, not just to get a diploma, but to walk away from a role that had been suffocating me. Eventually, I unblocked their numbers, not because I was ready to reconcile, but because I was no longer afraid of what they had to say. My fortress was built from the inside now, from self-worth and independence. Their words couldn't breach those walls. An email from my mother appeared a week later. The subject line was simply "thinking of you." It was a long, rambling message, full of justifications for the Disneyland trip. Aunt Linda had apparently prepaid for most of it as a gift, a detail they conveniently forgot to mention before, and accusations about how much I had hurt them. But nestled in between the excuses and the gaslighting, there was a single sentence that stood out. Your father has been asking about your new job. It was a tiny crack in their wall of indignant pride, a minuscule admission that they had severed a connection they might actually miss. I didn't reply. It wasn't time yet. Maybe one day it would be. Maybe one day we could build something new, a relationship based on honesty and respect. But it would have to be on my terms, on a foundation I had laid myself. For now, I was happy on my own. I had my work, my friends, and a quiet apartment that felt like a home. I was paying my own bills, making my own choices, and for the first time, I felt truly free. The "Family First" slogan from their t-shirts no longer brought a sting of rejection. It was just a reminder of the most important lesson they had ever taught me. That sometimes, the family you need to put first is the one you build for yourself. For anyone out there who has ever felt like an afterthought in their own family, who has been made to feel that your successes are an inconvenience and your needs are secondary, please know that you are not alone. It is a painful and confusing place to be. But the moment you realize that your worth is not determined by their attention is the moment you reclaim your power. Setting boundaries is not an act of aggression. It is an act of self-preservation. You are allowed to be your own priority. You are allowed to build a life that celebrates you, even if you have to build it on your own. Your stage is waiting, and you don't need anyone's permission to step into the spotlight.